The bank was busy, just like any other weekday morning. People shuffled in and out, some standing in line to deposit checks, others tapping away at their phones, lost in the rhythm of their daily routines. The soft buzz of conversation mixed with the clicking of keyboards, filling the air as Maria stepped into the queue. It was supposed to be a simple task, something so ordinary she didn't think twice about it when she left the house that morning. She needed to withdraw some money to cover the upcoming bills. Maria had always been careful with her finances. She checked her bank statements regularly, budgeting each month to ensure there was no shortfall. Nothing ever went wrong. She always had enough. Today, though, the unexpected was waiting for her. Her mind wandered briefly as she stepped up to the counter. The young teller behind the window barely glanced at her as she handed him her ID and account details. She had seen him before, an unremarkable face who seemed like he had worked here far too long. A practiced expression of boredom was plastered across his face. "Morning, ma'am," he said flatly, not even bothering to smile as he entered her details into the computer. Maria shifted her weight from one foot to the other, silently tapping her fingers against the countertop, her mind still drifting. She thought of her husband, Daniel. They had been married for over 5 years now, and although their lives had been anything but perfect, they had built a comfortable routine together. She glanced at her phone for a moment, checking if Daniel had sent a message, but there was nothing. The teller, after a few more keystrokes, looked back at her with a raised eyebrow. "Ma'am," he began, his voice much more serious now. "There seems to be an issue with your account." Maria blinked. "What do you mean, an issue?" She felt the first wave of unease creeping up her spine, her breath hitching slightly. "I've been checking my account regularly. There should be no problem." He hesitated, staring at the screen for what seemed like an eternity. "Your balance, it's 0. Maria felt her heart skip a beat. 0? No, that couldn't be right. There had to be some mistake. She could feel a coldness creeping into her hands as her fingers tightened around the counter. "What do you mean, 0? She asked, trying to keep the panic from spilling into her voice. "There's money in there. I've been saving." "How could this be?" The teller didn't answer immediately. He only typed furiously into the computer, the clicking of the keys echoing in the tense silence. Maria's pulse quickened. "I'm afraid the balance has been cleared," the teller finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. "The account was emptied. It's all gone." Maria's mind reeled. Gone? What did he mean gone? Who could have taken it? She had worked so hard for every penny. She had watched her spending, saved carefully, and tracked everything to make sure there were no mistakes. But now, in a flash, her entire world seemed to tilt on its axis. "Are you sure?" she asked again, trying to steady her voice. "I did not authorize any transaction. How could this happen?" "I'm afraid you'll have to speak with the manager," the teller replied, his voice distant, as if he were already losing interest in the situation. He gestured toward the office behind him, signaling that she needed to go there next. Maria stood frozen for a moment, trying to process what he had just said. Her vision blurred for a second as her mind scrambled for answers. How could her account be emptied without her knowledge? Had her online banking been hacked? Before she could ask any more questions, the manager, a tall woman in her early 40s with short, sharp features, approached the counter. Her eyes were focused, and she moved with a sense of authority that made Maria feel even smaller. "Ma'am," the manager said in a tone that felt both clinical and rehearsed. "We need to discuss the issue with your account. Please come with me." Maria wanted to argue, to demand answers, but she found herself following the manager into the back office anyway. The door clicked shut behind them, and as the manager sat down behind the desk, Maria's breath hitched again. The walls seemed to close in around her, her heart racing with a mixture of fear and confusion. "Take a seat," the manager instructed, pointing to the chair opposite her. Let me explain the situation in more detail. Maria sat, her knees trembling slightly as she tried to keep her composure. She had a million questions swirling in her head, but she couldn't seem to find her voice. Your account was emptied, the manager said bluntly, her tone matter-of-fact. A series of large transactions went through it over the last few days. The funds were transferred out. The last one happened just yesterday. Maria blinked, trying to make sense of her words. Transferred out? But I didn't do that. I haven't made any transfers. What do you mean by transferred out? The manager's face remained impassive. She folded her arms across her chest. I'm afraid the transfers were made via your online banking system. There's no indication that anyone else accessed your account through unauthorized means. Maria's mind swirled. This didn't make sense. She didn't use online banking for large transactions. She didn't even have the habit of transferring money around. Someone must have hacked my account. Maria cried out, the anxiety in her voice rising. I haven't done anything. I've been so careful. The manager gave her a look that was both cold and distant. We've looked through the records. It doesn't appear that your account was hacked. Every transaction shows up as if it was authorized by you. Maria's heart raced. But I didn't authorize anything. The manager shook her head, her expression unmoving. That's what we're trying to figure out. The money's gone, and there's no record of who took it. Maria's head began to spin. She felt a rising sense of panic, like she was losing control of everything. This was all happening too fast, and she couldn't keep up. Her breath came in shallow gasps as she struggled to maintain her composure. Before she could say anything else, the door to the office suddenly swung open. A familiar voice, deep and strong, filled the room. Is everything okay in here? Daniel's voice cut through the tension like a blade. His tall frame filled the doorway, his eyes scanning the room until they landed on Maria. Maria's heart skipped a beat. The moment she saw him, she felt a wave of relief, but it was quickly replaced by a rising sense of dread. Something wasn't right. Daniel, her husband, was here. But what was going on? Why was he looking so serious? Daniel stepped into the office, his gaze never leaving Maria as he walked toward her. He was dressed casually today, in a navy blue polo shirt and jeans, but the weight of his presence was undeniable. He always carried himself with confidence, an air of someone who could fix any problem, no matter how big. Maria felt a slight flutter in her chest at the sight of him, but that was quickly overridden by the gnawing sense of unease that had been growing inside her since she walked into the bank. What's going on? Daniel asked, his voice calm but laced with concern. He turned to the manager. Why is there a problem with my wife's account? The manager looked up at Daniel, a flicker of surprise crossing her face before she quickly masked it. Mr. Matthews, your wife's account was cleared by several large transactions. We've been trying to figure out what happened, but there's no evidence of hacking. All the transactions appear to have been authorized by her. Daniel's jaw tightened as he turned to Maria. His gaze softened slightly, but there was something in his eyes that made her pause. It wasn't just the situation that seemed off. It was something more, a sense of urgency, of tension that had nothing to do with money. I'll handle this, Daniel said, his voice steady but filled with an intensity Maria hadn't heard in a long time. I want to see the transaction records, and I want them now. The manager nodded and quickly left the office. Maria was left in a daze, still struggling to understand what had happened. Her mind raced, but one thought kept circling: why was Daniel so calm? And why did it feel like he was hiding something? Daniel sat down beside her, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. His touch felt comforting, but it couldn't quiet the growing storm inside her. What's going on, Daniel? Maria asked, her voice trembling. Who did this to us? Why is this happening? He didn't immediately respond. His eyes flicked toward the door, as if he were measuring every word before speaking. "Don't worry," Daniel said finally, his tone quieter now. "We'll get to the bottom of this. I'll make sure everything is sorted. You don't need to worry about a thing." But Maria couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this than Daniel was letting on. She watched him carefully, but he didn't meet her gaze. It was almost as if he was avoiding it. The silence in the office grew heavier as the minutes ticked by. The tension was unbearable. Maria had to know. There had to be something he wasn't telling her. Suddenly, the door opened again, and the manager stepped in with a pale face. She handed Daniel a folder, her hand trembling slightly as she did so. Daniel took the folder, his eyes scanning the contents quickly. His face remained unreadable, but Maria could see the subtle shift in his expression, the tightening of his jaw. "It's worse than we thought," the manager said quietly. "Someone was able to wipe the account completely clean. And they've covered their tracks." Maria's heart stopped. "What do you mean, covered their tracks?" The manager looked at Daniel before answering. "The money didn't just disappear. It was moved into a series of accounts, and then immediately withdrawn. Whoever did this knows what they're doing." Maria's breath caught in her throat. Who could have done this? And more importantly, why? Daniel stood up slowly, his eyes never leaving the page. "We need to find out who did this. And we need to do it fast." But Maria couldn't shake the feeling that whatever was going on, it wasn't just about the money. It was something much bigger. Maria couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. The words, "covered their tracks," echoed in her mind as if they were a haunting refrain she couldn't escape. Her heart pounded in her chest, each beat growing louder as she sat in that sterile office, her thoughts racing faster than she could process. Daniel, her husband, had always been the calm, steady force in their lives, but today, she saw a side of him she had never witnessed before, a coldness in his eyes that didn't quite match the reassuring words he spoke. "We'll fix this," he had told her earlier, his voice smooth and confident. But his demeanor had shifted, and something in his tone now made her question whether he was hiding something. The manager had left them alone in the office, her footsteps retreating down the hall as Maria and Daniel sat in an uncomfortable silence. The folder Daniel held in his hands had been placed on the desk in front of him, but he hadn't opened it. Instead, he stared at it, his jaw clenched tightly. Maria's mind raced, her heart heavy with a mounting sense of dread. She needed answers. She had to understand why this was happening. Her life, her finances, everything she had worked so hard for, had been stolen. And now, her husband was acting strangely, distant, like a stranger. "Daniel, what's going on?" she asked, her voice breaking through the silence. She could feel the tears welling up in her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She needed to be strong. "Why are you acting like this? Who took the money? And why is this happening?" Daniel looked up at her, his face unreadable. He took a deep breath before he spoke, his voice low but steady. "Maria, I need you to trust me. I'll figure this out. I promise you." He paused for a moment, his eyes lingering on hers as if searching for something. "But you need to stay calm. This is bigger than you think." Maria felt a chill run through her. His words sent a wave of confusion and fear washing over her. "Bigger? What do you mean bigger?" Her mind struggled to connect the dots. How could this be anything more than a financial mistake, a hack, or a scam? Daniel reached for the folder on the desk and slowly flipped it open. The papers inside were filled with details, transaction records, bank statements, and notes that Maria couldn't make sense of. She leaned forward, trying to catch a glimpse of the information, but Daniel quickly closed the folder and set it aside. "It's not something you need to see right now," Daniel said, his voice almost apologetic but still firm. Maria stared at him, feeling the weight of his words press down on her chest. There was something he wasn't telling her. There was something lurking beneath the surface, something dark and unsettling, and she wasn't sure she could handle it. "Why are you hiding this from me, Daniel?" she asked, her voice cracking. "We're supposed to be partners in everything. If there's something going on, I have the right to know. You're scaring me." Daniel hesitated, and for a moment, it seemed like he was about to speak. But instead, he stood up abruptly, running a hand through his hair in frustration. "I didn't want you to get involved in this," he muttered under his breath. "It's complicated." Maria stood up, her eyes locked on his. "What's complicated?" "You're not telling me the truth. And I want to know why." The manager returned to the office then, her heels clicking sharply on the floor. Maria turned to her, hoping for an explanation, anything to ease the turmoil that was building inside her. "Mr. Matthews, I'm afraid we found something troubling," the manager said, her voice tight with concern. "There's a pattern in these transactions. Someone knew exactly what they were doing." Daniel's expression darkened at the manager's words, his eyes flicking toward the papers again. "What kind of pattern?" he asked, his voice colder now. The manager paused for a moment, her gaze shifting between Maria and Daniel. "These transfers weren't random," she explained. "They were meticulously planned. Every transfer moved the funds to accounts that were linked to offshore entities, accounts we can't track easily. Whoever did this, they were trying to cover their tracks from the very beginning." Maria's stomach dropped. Offshore accounts? Why would anyone take her money and send it to a place she couldn't reach? She didn't know much about offshore banking, but she had heard enough to know it was a tool for hiding assets. But who would want to do that to her? Daniel's expression remained impassive as he processed the information. Maria wanted to scream, to demand that he give her some answers. But something in his demeanor kept her at bay, a sense of distance she hadn't noticed before. "You need to act quickly," the manager said, breaking Maria's thoughts. "The longer we wait, the harder it will be to trace these transactions. We need to contact law enforcement." Maria's breath caught in her throat. "Law enforcement," she echoed, her mind racing. "You think this was a crime?" The manager nodded. "It's starting to look that way. We've already alerted the authorities about the situation. But we may need your help, Mrs. Matthews." Maria turned to Daniel, her heart pounding. He hadn't said a word since the manager had spoken, and she could feel the tension in the room thickening. What was he thinking? Why wasn't he more concerned? "Daniel, why aren't you saying anything?" Maria asked, her voice shaking. "I need you to tell me what's going on. I can't keep guessing." Daniel finally met her gaze, and for the first time, Maria saw something in his eyes, something that made her blood run cold. It wasn't fear or worry. It was something darker. "I can't explain it all right now," Daniel said quietly, his voice distant. "But you need to trust me. There are things happening that you don't understand. I don't want to drag you into this." Maria's mind reeled. She wanted to shout, to demand answers. But something in Daniel's tone made her pause. It was almost as if he was protecting her from the truth. But what was he hiding? What was so terrible that he couldn't share it with her? Before she could respond, the manager cleared her throat. "Mr. Matthews, I've compiled all the records you asked for. We need to move quickly if we're going to find the people behind this." Daniel nodded, his eyes still locked on Maria's. For a moment, the world felt like it was spinning out of control. Her thoughts were jumbled, and she felt as if she were standing on the edge of something, teetering between the truth and a web of lies. "I'll take care of this," Daniel said, standing up again. "Maria, go home. Rest. I'll handle it." Maria opened her mouth to protest, but he was already walking toward the door, the folder in his hand. He didn't look back, his footsteps echoing through the quiet office. The manager gave Maria a sympathetic glance before following Daniel out of the room, leaving Maria alone with her thoughts. The silence in the room was suffocating. Her heart raced as she replayed the events in her mind. Her bank account had been wiped clean. The money was gone, and now, her husband was acting like a stranger. What was going on? Why wasn't he telling her the truth? Maria stood there for a long time, unsure of what to do. She wanted to trust Daniel, but the unease gnawing at her insides wouldn't let her. She had always believed in their partnership, their shared life, but now, everything felt like it was unraveling. Was Daniel involved in this somehow? Or was there someone else pulling the strings? She felt a sudden urge to leave the bank, to get away from the suffocating tension. She didn't know what was happening, but she knew one thing for sure: nothing was what it seemed. As she stepped out of the bank and into the busy street, Maria's phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out, her hands trembling, and saw a text message from Daniel. "I love you, Maria. Trust me. I'll fix this." But Maria couldn't shake the feeling that trust was the last thing she had left to give. Maria sat in the quiet of her apartment, the steady hum of the city outside her window a faint background noise to the whirlwind of thoughts racing through her mind. The text from Daniel still sat on her phone screen. "I love you, Maria. Trust me. I'll fix this." Each word seemed to echo in her head, but they brought her no comfort. Her hand clenched around the phone, the weight of her own uncertainty sinking deep into her chest. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to trust the man she had been married to for years, the man who had been her anchor through the highs and lows of life. But something had shifted. Something had changed, and no matter how hard she tried to ignore it, the feeling gnawed at her from the inside. How could he just leave her hanging like this? Why hadn't he told her the truth? She needed answers, answers he was too afraid or too proud to give. Her mind kept going back to the look in his eyes when they were at the bank earlier. The coldness. The detachment. It wasn't the look of a man trying to protect her, it was the look of someone hiding something, someone too deep in a mess to climb out. Was he involved in what happened? Did he know more than he was letting on? The thought made her stomach turn. She had always believed that trust was the foundation of their relationship, but now, she wasn't so sure. If she couldn't trust him, who could she trust? Her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of her doorbell ringing. She froze. No one ever visited her unannounced, especially at this hour. Her heart skipped a beat. Was it Daniel? Had he come to explain everything? Or was it someone else, someone connected to the mess that was unfolding in her life? With hesitant steps, Maria made her way to the door. She peeked through the peephole and saw a woman standing outside, dressed in a crisp suit and holding a briefcase. The woman's dark hair was pulled back into a neat ponytail, and her expression was serious, almost stern. Maria's breath caught in her throat. She didn't recognize her, but she had a feeling this woman was part of something much larger than she could comprehend. She opened the door slowly. "Can I help you?" Maria asked, trying to keep her voice steady. The woman glanced at her, then at the apartment door as if assessing whether it was safe to enter. "I'm sorry to bother you this late, Mrs. Matthews, but I need to speak with you. I'm Agent Williams, and I'm with the Federal Bureau of Investigation." Maria felt a chill run down her spine. "The FBI?" she echoed, her voice barely a whisper. Agent Williams nodded, her expression grim. "Yes, I'm afraid your husband is part of an ongoing investigation, and we need to ask you a few questions." Maria's heart pounded in her chest. She barely registered the rest of the agent's words. Her mind was spinning, everything she thought she knew slipping away. Daniel? Part of an investigation? But why? What was going on? "Mrs. Matthews, may I come inside?" Agent Williams asked. Her tone was polite, but there was no mistaking the urgency behind her request. Maria stepped aside, still in shock. She didn't know what was happening, but she knew this was bigger than anything she could have ever imagined. She led Agent Williams to the living room and sat down on the couch, her hands trembling in her lap. The agent placed her briefcase on the coffee table, opened it, and pulled out a stack of documents. "I know this is overwhelming, but I need you to listen carefully. We've been investigating a network of financial crimes, and your husband's name has come up in connection with a series of suspicious transactions." Maria's mind raced. Her first instinct was to defend Daniel, to say that he couldn't possibly be involved. But as she listened to Agent Williams explain the details of the investigation, doubt began to creep into her thoughts. These transactions were traced to multiple offshore accounts, Agent Williams continued. The money that was taken from your account, along with several others, appears to be part of a larger operation. We believe this is an international money laundering scheme. Maria's breath caught in her throat. Her vision blurred for a moment as the weight of the words hit her. Money laundering? Daniel was involved in something like that? She couldn't believe it. "I know this is difficult, but we need your help, Mrs. Matthews," Agent Williams said. "Do you know of any unusual activity in your husband's business dealings? Has he been acting strangely lately?" Maria shook her head, her heart racing. "No. I had no idea. This is all a complete shock." The agent didn't look surprised by her response. She flipped through the papers in her briefcase, pulling out a few more documents. "We've also discovered something else. The offshore accounts that were linked to your husband are connected to people with ties to organized crime syndicates. We have reason to believe that Daniel Matthews may be more involved than you think." Maria's mind went blank. The thought of Daniel being involved with criminals, with organized crime, was unthinkable. He was a successful businessman, a man she had always looked up to. He was supposed to be the one who protected her, not the one who needed protection. "Agent Williams, this can't be true," Maria said, her voice trembling. "My husband isn't involved in anything like this. He's not a criminal." The agent looked at her sympathetically but shook her head. "I wish I could tell you it's all a misunderstanding, Mrs. Matthews. But the evidence we've gathered points to a much darker truth. We need your help to get to the bottom of this. We're hoping you can help us understand more about your husband's activities." Maria sat back in the chair, her thoughts a blur. She didn't know what to believe anymore. Her trust in Daniel, the man she had spent her life with, was slowly being shattered. The woman who had stood by her side through every challenge now seemed like a stranger to her. Could he really be involved in all this? Could he really be hiding something so monstrous from her? But as much as she wanted to deny it, the pieces of the puzzle were starting to fit. The mysterious transfers, the strange behavior, the coldness in his eyes, it all made sense now. But why? Why would he do this? What had driven him to betray her trust, their life, everything they had built together? The questions swirled in Maria's mind, and with each passing moment, she felt more and more alone. Her marriage, her world, was unraveling before her eyes, and she had no idea how to stop it. "I need to speak with him," Maria said, her voice firm despite the fear bubbling inside her. "I need to confront him. I need to understand what's going on." Agent Williams nodded, her expression unreadable. "I understand. But I strongly advise you to be cautious, Mrs. Matthews. There's a lot at stake here, and your safety may be in danger. Please, let us handle this investigation. We will keep you updated." Maria didn't respond. She was too lost in her thoughts, too consumed by the overwhelming weight of the situation. Her mind was racing as she thought about the man she loved, the man she had trusted above all others. Was he really the person she thought he was? Or had he been hiding a darker truth all along? As Agent Williams left the apartment, Maria sat in silence, staring at the empty space where her world had once stood. The truth was slipping further and further from her grasp, and the realization hit her harder than she expected. She didn't know who Daniel was anymore. Maria stood at the edge of the city's skyline, her heart heavy, each breath she took filled with the weight of all that had transpired. She had never expected her life to turn into a whirlwind of lies, deception, and betrayal. As the wind tugged at her hair, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was standing at the precipice of something far bigger than her. It was as if everything she had believed in, the life she thought she shared with Daniel, had been a carefully constructed lie. And the longer she thought about it, the more the truth began to eat at her from the inside. Her phone buzzed, pulling her from her spiraling thoughts. She glanced down at the screen. It was a message from an unknown number. She hesitated for only a second before opening it, her fingers trembling slightly as she read. "I know you've been questioning everything lately. If you want the truth, meet me tonight. 8 p.m. You'll be the one who decides what happens next." The message was signed, Daniel. Maria's breath caught in her throat. It was him. She didn't know what to think. What did he mean by the truth? Could she trust him enough to meet him? Was this part of the investigation that Agent Williams had warned her about? Could she really stand face to face with the man who had been her everything, knowing now that so much had been hidden from her? She texted back, her fingers moving on their own, "Where?" A minute later, another message came through. It simply read, "The park. Near the old fountain. Come alone." Later that night, Maria found herself standing in the dark, cold air of the park, the once beautiful fountain now nothing more than a concrete basin, waterless and cracked. The silence of the place felt heavy, oppressive, as if it was holding its breath along with her. She had never been afraid of the night before, but now, with every step she took, the shadows seemed to stretch longer, darker. Was it fear of the unknown, or was it fear of facing the truth about Daniel? She clutched her jacket tighter around her body, trying to keep the cold at bay. Her heart pounded in her chest, each beat louder than the last. There was a sound, soft, almost imperceptible. A figure emerged from the darkness. It was Daniel. He looked the same, but there was something different about him. An unsettling distance in his eyes, a weight in his posture that she hadn't seen before. His once confident stride was now hesitant, almost as if he were walking through quicksand. "Maria," he said, his voice low, filled with a sadness that seemed to penetrate the air between them. "Why, Daniel?" Maria asked, her voice trembling despite her efforts to remain composed. "Why didn't you tell me? All this time, I trusted you. I loved you. And you let me believe in a lie." Daniel's face was hard to read, but there was pain there, real pain. "I never meant for it to go this far," he said, his voice strained. "You have no idea what I've been going through." Maria took a step back, shaking her head. "You don't get it, do you? You've been hiding everything. From me, from the FBI. You've been involved in things that I never could have imagined. And now you want me to believe that it wasn't your fault?" He looked down, the weight of her words sinking in. "I never wanted you to be a part of this. Maria. I never wanted to hurt you. But sometimes life doesn't give you choices. You just get dragged into things, and before you know it, you're in too deep to turn back." Maria's stomach churned. She had spent weeks trying to piece together what had happened, trying to find the truth behind the lies he had fed her. And now, here he was, admitting to his involvement in a world she never even knew existed. "So, you're telling me that you had no control over any of this? That you were just a victim?" He didn't answer right away. He simply stood there, his eyes filled with regret. Finally, he spoke again, his voice barely above a whisper. "It wasn't supposed to be like this. I got involved with the wrong people. The money laundering, the offshore accounts, it was supposed to be temporary. just a way to cover the company's debts. But I got too deep. Too far in. And the more I tried to get out, the more dangerous it became. Maria couldn't believe what she was hearing. And you thought I wouldn't find out? You thought you could keep all of this from me forever? I didn't want to drag you into it, he said quickly. I thought I could fix it. I thought I could protect you. But when the FBI started investigating, I knew it was only a matter of time before they would get to me. I didn't know what to do, Maria. I didn't know who to trust anymore. Maria's mind was a storm of emotions. She had never expected anything like this. She had thought that the life they had built together was solid, unshakable. But now, it was all falling apart. The man she had shared everything with was not who she thought he was. He had been lying to her, hiding secrets that could destroy them both. She had trusted him with her life, and he had betrayed that trust in the most unimaginable way. I don't know if I can ever forgive you for this, Maria said, her voice breaking. How could you let this happen? How could you risk everything, including us? Daniel reached out, his hand shaking. Please, Maria, I never wanted any of this to happen. I love you. I'm so sorry. I never wanted to hurt you. I just wanted to protect you. She stepped back, the distance between them growing wider. You can't protect me by lying to me. You can't protect me by hiding the truth. You should have come to me. We should have faced this together. He stared at her, his eyes filled with desperation. I couldn't risk it, Maria. If I had told you the truth, you'd be in danger. I couldn't live with that. Her anger flared, the sting of his betrayal burning through her. And what about me? What about the danger I'm in now? You've put my life at risk, Daniel. You've dragged me into a mess that I never wanted to be a part of. Do you even care about that? Daniel opened his mouth to respond, but before he could, there was a sound in the distance, a car pulling up, its headlights casting long shadows on the ground. Maria's heart skipped a beat. Who's that? She asked, her voice suddenly tight with fear. Daniel's eyes widened in panic. They found us. I don't know how, but they're here. Maria's mind raced. She had no idea who they were, but she knew one thing for certain, she didn't want to be there when whatever was coming hit. We need to go, now. But before they could move, a group of men appeared from the darkness. They were wearing black suits, their expressions unreadable. Maria's pulse quickened as she realized that the danger was far from over. The men moved in quickly, surrounding her and Daniel. One of them stepped forward, his voice cold and commanding. Mr. Matthews, we've been looking for you. It's time to finish what you started. Maria's mind was spinning. Who were these people? And what did they want with Daniel? Before she could react, Daniel stepped forward, his body tense. I'm not going anywhere with you, he said, his voice full of defiance. You'll have to kill me first. Maria's heart raced as she realized that the situation was spiraling out of control. She didn't know who these people were, but she knew one thing: if she didn't get out of there, everything she had left would be lost. She turned to run, but the men were too quick. One of them grabbed her arm, pulling her back into the circle. Daniel struggled, but the men were too strong. And as the tension reached its peak, the truth finally hit her: there was no escape. The life she thought she had was gone. Everything she had believed in was now nothing more than ashes.